Our next speaker is Peter Lerner. Peter Lerner is a lieutenant colonel that's dealing, he's the IDF media advisor, spokesman, and he's actually dealing with this crisis today about the 3 teenagers yeshiva that kidnapped. Peter, bevakasha. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nitzan. What a great venue this is. Thanks for coming. Thanks for the opportunity to speak here. And although in my official position, I'm the IDF spokesperson for the foreign media, and I do have, I would say, extensive outreach to many of the people in this in the hall. I've been asked to speak a bit about the strategic threats that the IDF face on our front. And just before coming in, I was looking on the door, and on one side of the door it says Israel's image problem. And on the other side, on the other door, it says the Israeli strategic threats. And that is sometimes where I find my daily business, in between that spectrum. Unfortunately, I mean, I wish I could come here and talk to you and say, we're going to be Switzerland, perhaps some other European country, but no, we like being Israel, and we like addressing the threats, but the threats are real. Over the next 20-25 minutes, I will speak shortly about the threats. I will try and expose to you our concerns on all fronts. And if you were to ask me, Peter, what are the IDF's main concerns that you have and you hold today, I would probably indicate 3 main components. Primarily at the top of the list, and you've heard the Prime Minister, I would put Iran. Second, I would note radical Islam and violent extremist organizations. There you go.
Sorry.
And third, I would say the instability on the periphery of our borders. So I will go through the regional fronts that we face throughout the short discussion, and I will try and expose to you and share with you our concerns and the type of reality that we have. Indeed, Israel is today currently facing threats on all fronts. These changes are a result of the regional instability and the reality that we are living in. We live in times when state sovereignty in the Middle East cannot be taken for granted. The lines drawn up about 100 years ago by a Frenchman and an Englishman, Sykes-Picot, are phasing out. They are phasing out by those extreme, violent, extremist organizations, and I would say they are actually redrawing them. So, what does that mean for the IDF? Ultimately, it means that we are faced with a reality that our main threat actually come from non-state, semi-state actors, whether it be Hezbollah in Lebanon, or perhaps Hamas in Gaza, and in the last 13 days we've heard a lot about Hamas in Judea and Samaria in the West Bank. And of course Al-Qaeda and its affiliates that have been getting a lot of coverage in the last week or so because of ISIS. And while the traditional military threats, the military formations have not completely disappeared, and indeed as we speak, Iran continues to supply the Syrian army with weapons and munitions, and we have to be concerned about that. We are faced with this extensive threat, the extensive threat of rocket terrorism. Rocket terrorism, that's a concept. No battle in history has been won with just rockets. But this is a concept which has developed since the 90s. But now all of our adversaries realize that this is their This is their added value. This is what they can actually reach out with. So they are operating in order to expand their stockpiles, expand their precision, and expand their striking power. We do understand that while there is a lesser threat, a lesser chance of that conventional war that we used to prepare for, there is, on the other hand, a greater threat of a more direct, I would say more casualties, and a direct threat on the Israeli population. So that's the way up. That's how we view it. We will have more face-on battle with the military, and these rockets that will be charged and targeting the Israeli civilian population. So this is what keeps us awake at night when we're rolling around in bed and what we're thinking, what do we have to do next to safeguard the Israeli civilians. This is what is keeping us up. Ultimately, it's our home front. It's the IDF home front. And yes, they are on our borders. They are rallying around the flag, preparing for that day, and to decide when and how to address and attack our freedoms, the freedoms of the State of Israel. The IDF has to be prepared for this. We have to be prepared for what the future brings in this type of combat situation. On Iran, we understand that there is an ongoing process, but they still haven't given up their nuclear vision or aspirations. But the reality of sanctions pushed them to the table. And I would also say, and I would also add, the internal, the populace influenced the government there, and the sanctions were effective in creating and bringing them to the table of world powers. And indeed, that's having its influence. But they can't ignore the street. It's not disconnected, obviously, with what's happened in the last 3 years in the region. Arab Spring, Islamist winter, the upheaval. But the role of the voice is substantial. The populace has influenced the political situation in Iran, and the international debate and the internal debate and the image of Iran and where is it going to. We still are undetermined what the era of Rouhani will be about. But indeed, Iran is continuing to invest in its force building against Israel with long-range capabilities, with its global network of terrorists, and indeed with those nuclear aspirations which I indicated earlier. Moving around to Lebanon, which have become and have developed since the civil war in Syria as our main point of reference for force building. Historically, Syria was the most formidable threat that we had. So up until 3 years ago, all of our force building was built around the Syrian threat. But that's changed. Syria does no longer pose that threat, and our new point of reference is actually Hezbollah. Hezbollah today, they threaten the well-being, the safety and security of all Israelis everywhere in Israel. They have a vast amount of weapons that they've accumulated with the support of Iran in volume and destructive force. And it's a challenge that we address on a daily basis. They have approximately 100,000 rockets. 100,000 rockets. That's more than most European countries. When I tell journalists Hezbollah have 100,000 rockets, they look at me though. Okay, come on. What is 100,000 rockets? You can't even grasp that figure. And indeed, when we try and prepare ourselves for that type of threat, we have to take into consideration the civilian population. I'll sidestep from my talking points just to try and give you an idea what 100,000 rockets would mean. In 2012, we had an operation in Gaza, Pillar of Defense. I'm sure you've heard of it. 8 days, we had a bout with Gaza. They shot 1,500 rockets at Israel in 8 days. 100,000 rockets means Hezbollah could shoot double that per day and keep us under fire for a month. No, we don't intend on letting them do that, but that's the potential of destruction that they have. Hezbollah is a strategic forearm and a forward division of Iran on our northern border. I would say, and perhaps I'm coming over a bit over-dramatic, and not everything is bad, Hezbollah is completely tied up with what's going on in Syria today. They're invested there, they're combating, they're fighting. They are indeed not interested in having another bout with Israel because of their involvement with Syria, because of the internal politics in Lebanon, and also because of I think, substantial amount of deterrence that Israel still holds as far as the possibility of combat with Israel. They know that Lebanon will pay dearly if they test us. I would say, in over 100 villages in southern Lebanon, mostly the Shiite villages, clearly, we can see extensive infrastructure, rockets that have been placed in houses, beneath houses, deeply within the civilian population. In one house, traditionally the houses there are 3 stories high, and on one story you would have 2 or 3 rooms. One room is a living room, and the second room is a rocket room. That's the way they have operated. That's the way they've developed since 2006. Obviously, for us, from a military point of view, to try and address that type of threat, how do you just target the rocket room? Think about it. But indeed, they have their hands tied. They're extremely busy with what's going on in Syria. I would go to the extent of saying that without their involvement in Syria, Syrian regime would find it extremely hard to survive. But we have to be prepared for that confrontation with Hezbollah nevertheless. We are building the force to meet that threat with precision munitions, with swift maneuverability, and all based on advanced intelligence which is gathered constantly for the conflict and during the conflict. We do want to strike that missile room. Syria poses a different threat today. As I did say 3 years ago, that was our point of reference. Everything was planning to address the divisions of the Syrian military, to address the advanced capabilities there of Air Force capabilities, which is mostly Russian-supported. But today they're not in that position anymore. But I would also say that the threat of Syria is not just the threat of Israel. It's influencing everywhere in the region, from Turkey to Jordan, obviously to Lebanon, the huge influx of refugees. And that is another cause of instability. Everybody has a vetted interest that it will be calm, but unfortunately this influx doesn't seem to be stopping. Syria has been called in recent years a house of cards, potentially toppling. And I would say that house of cards is being propped up by Hezbollah and by Iran and to some extent by Russia with their arms supplies. As far as the Syrian military is concerned, their forces are depleted, they are overwhelmed, reduced capabilities, reduced they've spent most of their rockets on the civilian population of Syria. But they're helped, as I said, with Hezbollah troops on the ground that have received orders from Iran, go and help Syria. Perhaps a few words on the opposition, on the Syrian opposition, which is now rated approximately 80% of those we believed have an Islamist agenda. So either way we look at it, it's not looking too good for Israel, either way. Much of the opposition have taken control of the area of the border with Israel on the Golan Heights. So yeah, we have challenges on the Golan that we do find extremely difficult to address. We have a policy of non-involvement in Syria, but we can't allow it to spill over into Israel. This week, just this week, we had a realization of that threat, and it was the most tragic realization. We've had incidents along that border. We've had soldiers that have been wounded with explosive devices. We've had rockets that have been launched at our positions. We've had errant fire that's landed within the state of Israel. But this week, it was exemplified, the reality of the spillover was exemplified by 15-year-old Mohammed Karaka. He went with his father. He joined his father on the work just for the day trip. And he was killed in a rocket that was directed at an Israeli vehicle on the Israeli side, just on the border. So it spills over. The reality of rule of law on the other side has changed into the reality of rule of gun. And we have to be prepared for that. We have to be poised and ready to stand guard to defend ourselves. The jihadis are the figure around the amount of jihadis is, we talk about, it's anything between 10,000 and 40,000. So that's a huge number. And how do you say who is a jihadi? So it's from the less extremists to the more extremists, but they're all there. But while they are extremely dispersed within Syria, they have one common denominator which binds them all. They're against our way of life. They're against the Western way of life. They're against the Western values. And that for us means eventually they have said it, that they will turn their weapons against Israel. So they too are a potential threat on our doorstep. And clearly confronting that type of organization is nothing that we have in I would say, traditional military terms of warfare. No chain of command, no strategic point of pressure to use. As I said, in any case, the situation in Syria is looking bleak, and it does not look too positive for the state of Israel. And what we're doing, and I think this is perhaps the most important, what we're doing to address that threat is, if you visit, I don't know if you have had the time to visit while you've been here, the Golan Heights now, we have developed and modified our defensive and offensive capabilities. In 2011, a Palestinian demonstrator skipped over a waist-high barbed wire fence. That's all it was on the Golan Heights. That was the confidence we had in the 40 years of peace and quiet with Syria. If you visit there today, you see a substantial barrier that is hard to penetrate. We have advanced surveillance capabilities. We have rearranged the forces on the ground. Traditionally, that area was always manned by reserve troops. We've replaced those, and we have regular troops on the ground, so they have an extended period of time, and that serves as a more professional force on the ground. So we have all of the tools at hand to address substantial threats there. It does not mean that there can be incidents like we had earlier this week with those tragic outcomes. I think the positive thing that I can tell you, and I can say as far as our strategic standing is concerned, is if I look south to Sinai, there's been an improvement in the last year. We've seen a decline in the standing of the jihadi organizations there, mostly because of the Egyptian activities against them. We've had sporadic rocket fire from there, a number of incidents that have struck Eilat. But mostly it has been, they do feel pursued by the Egyptian authorities, and that clearly is a good situation. Moving on to Hamas in Gaza. There's clear deterrence with Hamas. They don't want to mess with us again. Not in the immediate time, for sure. But they are taking the time to sometimes allow other organizations to operate. I would say sometimes even push them to operate to a certain extent. But they are, as an organization, as Hamas, are developing more rocket capabilities down there. They're extremely happy with themselves in Pillar of Defense that they were able to shoot rockets towards Tel Aviv. They were actually successful in reaching the metropolitan of Tel Aviv. They want to replicate that. We know today that they have hundreds of rockets that can reach Tel Aviv. So it's a question of why and under what circumstances will they use them. We still don't feel that they want to. They're also investing in circumventing our other defensive means. I mean, we have a fence around Gaza, and they've built terrorist tunnels. These tunnels are used, they are substantial tunnels used to penetrate into Israel to carry out some sort of, to give them some sort of tactical advantage on the ground. So we face a situation of confrontation with Gaza, and just last night, or just over the last 24 hours, they've shot 5 rockets from Gaza into Israel. 2 of them were intercepted by our missile defense system, by Iron Dome. Iron Dome is a smart system. It only intercepts when it calculates the rockets landing in densely populated areas. So we know that these 2 rockets were going to hit our towns. One of the rockets actually landed in an open area, and 2 of them landed in Gaza. They fell short. One of them hit a Palestinian house, and there's a 3-year-old Palestinian girl that was killed in this attack. These things usually don't get too much coverage. The wonders of social media. Finally, and I'll turn perhaps to the last front, which has got a lot of coverage over the last week, is Judea and Samaria. All of the threats that I've outlined in the short words that I've spoken have all been demonstrated in the last 13 days through this abduction of the 3 teenagers. When a violent extremist organization such as Hamas decides to abduct 3 teenagers on their way home, it goes to show how unstable the situation is, how it can go from 0 to 100 in a click, how that has the capability to change the reality on the ground. And indeed, today, we still have thousands of troops on the ground searching for any piece of information that can bring the boys home. We are pursuing Hamas in Judea and Samaria on all levels of its operation. We've arrested over 350 people. We're after its militant operatives. We're striking its organization on the levels of recruitment, on levels of propaganda, of levels of financial aid. We've seized hundreds and thousands of shekels. So yes, indeed, Hamas is paying for the actions that they are paying dearly for the actions of this abduction, but still, and unfortunately, I don't have any good news, and we still don't have the boys. I always get asked a lot, okay, what about the Palestinian Authority? Because they're there, you talk to them, what does that mean? And I would say that the discussions and the ongoing discussions with the Palestinian security forces in the last 6 or 7 years has been on a constant rise, and in some cases even intimate. But I would say, especially around this incident, that we are both on the same page. We all realize that it is bad for the security of the situation. We all realize that it's bad for the realization of any future developments. I'll end with, on that note, in saying that we are incorporating all of our capabilities, intelligence, forces on the ground, combined effort together with the other security apparatus, including the Shin Bet and the Israeli police force, in order to bring those boys home. We have a good track record. We usually get the bad guys. We go all the way, and we do get them. And we're confident that we will bring them home, and we're confident also that we will catch the terrorists responsible. How do we address all of the threats that I've just sketched before you briefly? And I think this is the main component of the IDF. If we talk about the situation analysis, which I've just described, and then how do we translate that into something that we actually have to do? And the IDF Chief of Staff, General Gantz, has he's sketched out, I think, 5 main components. Primarily, it would be people. The best form of preparedness of a military is to be able to adapt. There are changes. I described the changes that are happening. We are adapting almost on a daily basis to meet those challenges. We need to be small. We need to be nimble. We're cutting our troops. The government is expecting us to downtone the extent of our forces. Its officers should be educated as well as trained, because you train for the known, but you educate for the unknown so that people can actually look up to those challenges, look up to the chaotic situation. That's people. Secondly, I would say intelligence. That needs to be quality. It needs to be precise. It needs to be able to encompass the entire scope of the situation. And we realize that the scope today is anything between social trends to strategic implications. The type of intelligence organization that needs to cope with that needs to be vast, it needs to be professional, it needs to be on its toes. It needs to be able to turn the intelligence into something of substance for the company commander. In the past, and this was one of our main downfalls in the Second Lebanon War, the company commanders didn't have the intelligence. So what we've done is made a process of giving the company commanders that intelligence so that they can translate it into something effective on the battlefield. We need force superiority. We need to have that added value, the edge over all of our adversaries, whether it's in the air, at sea, and the ground forces. I pointed out the importance of intelligence. Our enemies are not sitting there waiting for us to come. They are doing everything in their efforts to conceal their actions. We need to be able to utilize all of our forces in a combined effort. The pilot needs to be able to talk to the battalion commander, and vice versa. They don't only need to be able to talk, they need to be able to understand what they're talking about, because if you talk to a pilot and you speak to an infantryman, it's two different languages. The technology needs to be able to talk. We need both defensive and offensive capabilities. We can't wait at the fence, as I indicated. We need to be able to stand at the fence strong, but at the same time, we need to be able to strike our enemies decisively and before they have the chance to strike us. And perhaps finally, and I will close, and perhaps if there are any questions I'm happy to take, the two advantages, I think the two main advantages that the IDF has today. The first, we call it this tragic advantage, but it is a reality. We have no choice. You know, we have no alternative. We have no second chances. We have to deliver the goods. We have to safeguard Israel's existence. Tragic. I was discussing with a colleague from the US military a couple of weeks ago about the concept of, defending the Israeli existence. The US military, they defend the US Constitution. Our second component, and I did point out a bit about the people, it is our people. The young men and women that fill our ranks, they are young, they are vibrant, they are the human capital that makes up this Israeli society, our education, our development, and absolutely our military. If we combine those two components together, invest in the present, we will absolutely ensure our future, and I'm certain that we will be here next year to talk at the Jewish Media Summit. Thank you very much. If there are any questions, I'm happy to take.
Maybe one or two questions. We've been hearing scattered reports, bits and pieces, that the terrorists are known by name, but they have not been released yet. And other things about relating to cars being burned and found and things of that sort. Is there any information you can give us of what you know specifically that has not been released or is about to be released? Because you are bringing the searches down now. You're ramping it down.
There's no change of force on the ground as we speak, actually. What I would say, so our primary concern and why we haven't released the information that we have to the public is the well-being of the boys. We don't want to give the terrorists the upper hand of what we know or what we don't know. The Prime Minister has openly declared that we know it's Hamas. I can say that it's more than circumstantial evidence. It's not just the fact that in the last year and a half they've tried to carry out 65 abductions in Judea and Samaria, around 65. It's not just the fact that they openly declare and strive to carry out these attacks. It's not just that. Indeed, there is developments in the investigation. You've heard what has openly been said. Unfortunately, at this time, we can't share it. We're concerned about the boys. That's our primary concern.
There's never been a length of time, however, where a situation like a kidnapping has gone, from what I understand, where there hasn't been some sort of proof of life.
Absolutely. I'm not aware of any instance in history. Historically, terrorists and abductions in Judea and Samaria have always stayed within that area, either alive or not. We're hoping that they are still alive. Of course, as time goes by, our concerns are increased and do for their safety and for their well-being. But at this time, unfortunately, I don't have any good news to say.
Last question, please.
Straightforward question. The straightforward question is Hebron. It's only so big, thousands of troops on the ground. Where are they? I mean, we don't know exactly, but at the same time, it's a very difficult process, and it seems like somewhere, if they are in Hebron.
That goes back to the circumstances. It goes to indicate the extent of the preparation for this attack. It goes to indicate that they're probably hidden well in some dark, dingy basement. And it goes to indicate of the level of support that they have. We haven't got any breakthroughs, unfortunately. We don't know where they are. If we knew, I'd probably be busy standing up in front of CNN explaining how good we were, hopefully. But indeed, we have to continue with the searches. They are ongoing, literally turning over every stone, and utilizing all of the tools that we do have, the intelligence, to get the captors, bring them to justice, and bring the boys home. As I said, we have a good track record in bringing these people to justice. Over the recent years, almost all of the terrorist attacks have been solved, cracked, and the people have, just this week, we publicly announced the incident from Passover that a terrorist attack killing an Israeli policeman was caught and brought back, and that he's back behind bars. We will get them. Thank you.